And strange to tell among the earthen lot, some could articulate, while others not. And suddenly one more impatient cried, "Who's the potter, pray, and who's the pot?" In nature, the complex may appear simple. Sunlight, birds, earth sheltered by redwood trees. In Armstrong National Forest, nature composes a simple harmony. Yet in this harmony exists ample room for the unique. These august redwood trees grow nowhere else. Complementing rather than dominating, they focalize this pristine environment. Marguerite Wildenhain came to this Northern California wilderness in 1940. Few American women artisans have acquired such international renown or have commanded as much respect. At noon on a Sunday in October of 1896, Marguerite Wildenhain was born near the city of Lyon in south-central France. Marguerite's German-born father, who owned a silk warehouse, encouraged his 5 children to become citizens of the world. Later, when her family moved to Germany, Marguerite attended the Berlin School of Applied Arts and Berlin University. While working at her first job as a porcelain designer in a factory in Thuringia, Marguerite happened to enter a workshop where a model maker was working at a wheel. Hypnotized, she at that moment knew what direction her life would take. Marguerite would become a potter. This is Pond Farm. Not the kind of person to shy from challenges, Marguerite built the ramshackle farm into her house, her studio, and later into her school.
Yeah, my ideal has always been Socrates. Not that I compare myself with Socrates, but he never wrote a book, he never gave a class, he never got a salary. But he talked to the people, and they were not the same. Although some betrayed him, like Alcibiades at the end. But still, you know, Plato, Aristotle, they were all his students originally. So I feel if you can't do anything with the human being, you might as well give up as a teacher.
I think it has to do with that in schools, teachers give just a part of themselves,
Yes.
just a certain narrow segment, that's their job.
Yes.
And you have the idea of, like the master and apprentice, the whole relationship.
Yes.
As a whole person,
Yes.
you open up and give.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so we have to respond the whole
And
way,
you
and
do.
that becomes the whole,
Yeah.
it's
Yes.
life and it's the
Yes.
craft.
Because something happens to all of us in the interchange of learning and living, we all like each other, more or less. Of course, some are near and some are less near. But we do become a family, the pond farmers. Like at the Bauhaus, we had one sort of and if somebody whistled it there on the top of
In
the
the
mountain,
aftermath of World War I in the central German town Weimar, Walter Gropius founded the Bauhaus. His new school, housed in the town's old school of arts and crafts, soon filled with a motley assortment of students. Some arrived in tattered uniforms, others in the same clothes they had worn since the beginning of the war. Still others came barefooted. All came united in their belief that the time of false pretenses and wrong values was over. Here was a place to start afresh, to mold with total devotion a vision of beauty and truth. The Bauhaus was a cathedral of crafts. Here crafts were an integral part of art, an art of total life. What distinguishes the Bauhaus from most schools is that Gropius enlisted many of the greatest artists and craftsmen in Europe as teachers. Marx, Feininger, Klee, Kandinsky, Schlemmer. Students eagerly served as apprentices to these great men.
Well, the Bauhaus, so much has been written on the Bauhaus that is a lie. That I hate to talk about the Bauhaus because nobody would believe what I say. But the Bauhaus was built on the crafts, not on the technique, not on making something crazy or necessarily square or like this. It was built on the idea that there is no difference, no primary difference between the craftsman and the artist. As Gropius said in his first writing where he advertised, so to say, the creation of the Bauhaus, he says, there's no basic difference between the craftsman and the artist. In moments of grace that come from somewhere one doesn't know, or something like that, it's not exactly right, the craftsman becomes an artist. It was much later only, after Rollie, and Itten and so had become teachers at the Bauhaus, that it slanted like this towards being so technical. And many of the masters there were absolutely against it. The sculptor Marx, Klee, Feininger, Schlemmer. But the others were more articulate. And also they all had a camera. That means they could photograph all those things, while the others didn't care. And so all this side of the Bauhaus was so became so prominent, which it wasn't really. It became so when it went to Dessau later. But the main thing, I would say quickly, was that it was built on the crafts and a complete human being. And if he were good, the craftsman would become an artist. That's how I feel too. You see, it's not a matter of special techniques or something. It's quite something else. At the Bauhaus, for instance, we had no degrees, no diploma, nothing. And when the American professors came to visit Gropius and they say, what did the student get when he's through with his work? He said, nothing. He's either learned something or he hasn't. Well, don't they need a diploma? No, Gropius said. If what we taught was right and they do a good job, they won't need a diploma. And if they do a bad job, they don't need a diploma either. They should not have a diploma. And this was the philosophy of the Bauhaus.
When Marguerite first arrived in California, she brought with her 7 years of skills developed as a journeyman apprentice at the Bauhaus. In Europe, she had taught pottery on the university level. Marguerite earned a living her first 2 years in the United States, teaching at a California college. However, her high standards for perfection of craft disillusioned Marguerite with California art education, so she moved to Pond Farm, where friends had offered her living and working space. In Marguerite's studio, craft has more than superficial meaning. Here a potter learns that pottery is a skill which requires years of dedicated work. She does not teach style or technique. She nurtures individual vision and helps her students translate this into their pottery, an arduous, disciplined, and ultimately self-rewarding journey. A good teacher, Marguerite writes, must not only know what he teaches, he must also be able to set afire his students' interest and dedication.
You have to correct that. It's never the material, it's never the technique. It's somehow what you manage to convey as human or aesthetic or religious or whatever you want to call it, content. If you don't do that, for me, you miss the point. I don't make pottery as a technique. That would very quickly bore me because I don't admire technique as such. I admire if you have something to say with that technique, you know. The prehistoric people had no technique to speak of, but they can make pots that move you. And we, with all our techniques, we have to fall for tricks to be even excited about the pot. I've stood in Iran and I've cried in front of a big pot handmade in Susa, 3000 BC. Why? Because it moved me so, it was so beautiful, just with black and red clay, white, black and red clay. You see, and this is the point that also my students get. It's not the technique, it's a way of life, or it's an attitude towards the infinite, or whatever you want to call it. I hate to put it in such words, but this is really the point. I was once invited at an architect's house in Vancouver, and the fellow said to me, we had a nice party, very nice, and he said, you know, I know many potters, there are many around in British Columbia, but you're the first that I've been able to talk about something else than glazes and kilns. And that interested me, because that is namely the point. You see, I read to the students sometimes. Every so now and then they say, read us something. And I read things, from all sorts of things, from the most elaborate philosophical one to Alice in Wonderland. And it all clicks. It's all one. And this is what I want to show. Well, here I live, that's my place. The world at large barely moves me. I say, Rodin in his testament says, don't worry about your public relation picture. The people who love you know why they love you, and those that hate you don't know why they hate you, and I think that's correct. You see, my students like me. They like me because they've learned something, and they're going to stand for me. I could travel to the whole United States every 200 miles about there's a student of mine where I could stay overnight. It's really the truth, you know? From San Diego and Dul Sur, clear to Vancouver and clear to Nova Scotia across, everywhere. They always say, you've done so much for me, I can't explain. I can never repay it. This is my great joy, you know? I don't think there are many people who have so much, really, love and gratitude from people as I get. It's sometimes so strong that it chokes me. I can't take it, you know? It's so enormous, but then I'm grateful. I mean, I could die today, and I don't think I've missed anything.